let's look at what has to be in place for the new behavior to take hold and to work and to replace the challenging behavior. There are 4 components of effective intervention. The first, the new behavior must be at least as successful as the challenging behavior in obtaining a response from others. So, for instance, if a child is taught to sign for break, then we must make sure that we're watching for that, because maybe we reacted very quickly to remove him from the circle time if he batted Susie on the head. We have to be just as reactive to make sure he can leave the circle time if he signs for break. Another example would be if a child's really screaming and yelling in the classroom to get attention. If we teach them to raise their hand and request attention in a more appropriate way, then we better be able to respond to that raised hand in the same way that we responded and as quickly as we responded to them screaming out. Otherwise, they're going to go back to the old behavior because it was more effective. Secondly, others must be able to easily recognize the new behavior and respond to it appropriately. So if we've taught the child to sign for break and they use it in the lunchroom, then the people who are watching them in the lunchroom better be able to know that that's a sign for break and to respond to it appropriately. Thirdly, others must find the new behavior acceptable in order to respond to it. And this has happened quite often where someone has modified a behavior with a child and someone else is like, oh, I don't want them signing in here, and because they don't approve of signing, they don't recognize the behavior and try to get them to do something else, and then your whole behavior plan takes a dive. So you need to make sure that everybody on board agrees with whatever new behavior that you teach. Lastly, the new communicative behavior must be at least as easy to produce and as efficient as the challenging behavior. So this is a concept that sometimes people have a hard time grasping. So if you're teaching a spoken response and the child can't always get to a spoken response, that is not going to change the challenging behavior. It doesn't mean that you won't continue to work on speech, absolutely, but when a child's in an anxiety-ridden, challenging behavior situation, you need to give them a communicative behavior that they can easily and consistently produce every single time. If it's a lot more trouble than the challenging behavior, we are efficient as human beings. They're going to go back to whatever the challenging behavior is. Okay, so now let's look at a brief example about applying this process in the classroom. Patrick's challenging behavior was interrupting the teacher. So an FBA was done, and this was the hypothesis that was put out for that. Patrick interrupts the teacher during group instruction. In 1 week's time, Patrick interrupted an average of 18 times per day. And this is not uncommon with children with autism because they often don't realize that the teacher is talking to other people other than themselves. So they see that they're not interrupting because to them it's a conversation between them and an adult, and they don't realize that they're listening as part of a group. After interrupting, adults frequently issued a verbal reprimand which had no effect. In other words, adults would often say, Patrick, quit interrupting. Patrick, we're talking about this. Patrick, stop that. And it had no effect on decreasing the number of times that Patrick interrupted. Patrick interrupts more often when bored or when he's tired. So when the discussion wasn't about something that he was interested in or his narrowed or restricted interest, he interrupted more often, and he also interrupted more often when he was tired, which makes sense too because it's harder to pay attention then. So if we look at his current level, He averaged greater than 4 times a class period of interrupting, and it happened more frequently when he was bored or tired, as we mentioned before. Prevention. We wanted to really visually represent the speaking and listening, so we gave a visual cue with a photograph of who was the speaker and who was the listener, using the speech bubbles from Comic Strip Conversation and the listener symbols from Comic Strip Conversations. So the skills to teach, we thought, were turn-taking, because that's inherent in conversation, listening as part of a group, and also topic maintenance, because he usually interrupted with something related to anime characters, which was his really narrow or restricted focus. So the evidence-based strategies that we chose to address these things were social stories combined with comic strip conversation symbols. So the aim of the social story was to show Patrick that the teacher was indeed talking to him, but also talking to other people, and to really visually represent the conversation of speaking and listening as a group, and also to make topic maintenance more visual by using a semantic web or a semantic organizer. So let's take a look at the semantic web now. So this shows the example of the semantic organizer that we used during classroom discourse. The teacher was talking about volcanoes, and so she was doing a really nice job of making the connections and associations of what the discussion or the brainstorm was about volcanoes. But then Patrick volunteered that Naruto had a sand alliance with the Leaf Shinobi, because that's what he was thinking about at that time. And so the teacher took that time to say, to point to volcanoes and say, Patrick, it's time to talk about volcanoes. You can talk about Naruto after class. So then she took a different color marker and put it separate and not connected with her volcano discussion, so that Patrick could see that talking about Naruto was a different topic than talking about volcanoes. And we did have a Naruto discussion time. There were 2 minutes at the end of the day when Patrick could talk all he wanted about Naruto or whatever anime character he was talking about at the time. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing Naruto correctly, because I don't watch those, but I did take the time to figure out what the characters were basically there. So you can see how you can use this online without even any extra preparation visually to show how to brainstorm a situation or an information giving lecture in class, and then to really show when people interrupt how it is not connected to the class discussion.